Welcome to the Baby Let's Talk podcast. My name is Ragna and I am your host. I am a medical doctor, a certified pre-postnatal trainer and a mother of 4, and I help moms reclaim their health and reach their goals through the power of movement, nutrition and overall healthy lifestyle. This podcast is born from my dedication to uncovering the truths about nutrition, exercise and lifestyle that genuinely benefit our bodies. We'll explore how to establish a lasting, healthy lifestyle that fits the reality of motherhood, how to enjoy an active, pain-free pregnancy, and how to navigate postpartum recovery to regain your fitness in a wholesome way. Join me as we debunk myths and discover the paths to excess energy, body confidence, and loving the life you live as a mom. Hi, and welcome to episode 7 of the Baby Let's Talk podcast. Today we're going to talk about digestive wellness or gut health. And this is the last episode in the foundational series of this podcast. So today we're going to talk about why it is important to focus on gut health, how we can support our digestive system, how we can support gut function. And we're going to go over the anatomy of the human gut and compare it to other animals and what they eat, and then what we are meant to eat. We're going to go over the different types of macronutrients, that how they affect our digestion, and ultimately what foods to eat. So without further ado, let's talk. Now, in regards to the food we eat and our gut, I like to look at it this way, that we should eat the foods that we are meant to eat. That is, we should eat foods that our body is evolutionarily designed to digest and absorb. So when we think about diet this way, it isn't actually that difficult to know how we're supposed to eat and what we're supposed to eat. And I think that it's appropriate to mention this here, that we humans, we have this kind of perverse tendency to overcomplicate things. We are this highly intelligent species with tremendous intellectual capacity, but something has happened in the past 120 years or so that has changed the way we eat. So the standard Western diet today is so far from what it has evolutionarily always been. And we are getting unhealthier and sicker by each year. And as this highly intelligent species that we are, we do find more and more fixes to that with medications, operations and so forth, but we fail to look at the diet. And I am not criticizing healthcare professionals or physicians at all. I am a physician myself, but the problem is that in today's society, we don't have time to get into the nitty-gritty details of each person's diet when a person presents a health problem to us. And that is a problem with the system as a whole, and that's also a problem with a problem that's created by the people in general. That is, people want quick fixes to their problems. We want a quick solution to our problem. That's the demand of the modern human, to get a pill or a supplement or an operation, etc., that will fix this problem, or rather put a band-aid over the issue, actually. So it's actually not only the issue with the whole healthcare system. This is an issue that is also in the hands of the people, because if you do go to a doctor because of some health issue, and the doctor begins digging into your diet and advising you to maybe make some changes here and there, and also, make some changes to your lifestyle, cut down on the drinking, partying, quit smoking or vaping, reduce the hours in front of the TV or gaming, and go and move more, exercise more, find hobbies that promote movement, take care of your sleep, and this and that. So, but if you're not someone who is motivated to do all the work it takes to kind of figure out how you can improve your lifestyle, you're going to go ahead and find another doctor who will prescribe the medication you're after. So, like I said, when someone has some health problem, be it overweight, depression, anxiety, infertility, hair loss, type 2 diabetes, digestive issues, trouble sleeping, autoimmune diseases, cardiovascular disease, we often fail to look at the diet. That is, what are you using to run your engines on? But it's like, if we look at veterinarians, for example, this is the first question they ask when someone comes in with a sick animal. What have you been feeding it? So again, I'm not I do not want to criticize anyone for anything. I just want to point out that we humans, we may have overcomplicated health a bit for the past century or so. So let's just take a step back and get back to basics here. So what should we then run our engines on? And in our case, the energy production process happens at the level of the mitochondria, which are these tiny little powerhouses or power factories in all of our cells. And the mitochondria, they use the nutrients from our food to produce usable energy that our cells can run on. But before the nutrients even get to the cells, they have to be absorbed from our digestive system. So let's talk about that today, our digestive system. Now, first of all, we've all heard about the gut and that it's where we digest our food and that it's important. And so we kind of know what it is and what its role is. But I'll just go over a few basics here before we get into a lot of details. So firstly, the digestive system is so much more than just the gut. It begins actually in the mouth and goes all the way down. And it is designed to break down food that comes in into its most basic components so that these can be absorbed or taken up into our bloodstream and then to be used by our body's cells for energy production, building and repair, and many other physiological processes. So let's have a look at the anatomy of our digestive system in relation to nutrient absorption. So first we have the mouth. Digestion begins in the mouth where we chew our food, so breaking it down into smaller pieces and increasing the surface area of the food. And then when we chew food, more saliva is produced, and saliva contains an enzyme that is called amylase, which starts the chemical breakdown of carbohydrates. And a fun fact, you may have had an experiment in school or just tried it yourself to chew bread for a long time before swallowing it. At least I remember we had some experiment like this in school one time. And there's this interesting thing that happens that after you have chewed it for a while, it suddenly becomes very sweet. And that's because the enzyme amylase has broken down the carbohydrates in the bread to its simplest form, which is glucose, which you do remember from our earlier episodes. And glucose is really sweet. So if you haven't tried this already, it's quite fun, and I suggest that you try it sometime, maybe with your kids. It's fun. Then after the mouth, we have the esophagus, which is a muscular tube, and its role is simply to transport food from the throat and to the stomach. And the stomach is then a muscular sac-like organ that further mixes the food with digestive juices. So there's both mechanical digestion going on here and chemical digestion. That is, the stomach churns food to mix it with gastric juices, and the gastric glands then secrete hydrochloric acid into the stomach, which kills bacteria and provides the acidic environment that is needed for an enzyme that is called pepsin to break down proteins. So these are the main roles of the stomach. There's not a lot of absorption going on in the stomach, but the stomach is able to absorb some substances such as water, electrolytes, certain drugs, and alcohol. And then after the stomach, we come down to the small intestine, which is the primary site of digestion and absorption. And it consists of three parts: the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. So when the food matter, or chyme, as it's called at this point, enters the duodenum, it is then mixed with bile that comes from the gallbladder and digestive enzymes that come from the pancreas. Now, bile emulsifies fats, which makes them then easier to digest, and the various pancreatic enzymes work to further break down carbohydrates and proteins and fats. Then the jejunum and ileum, these are the main sites for absorption of nutrients, and they make up the absolute majority of the small intestine. And the small intestine is often about 3 to 5 meters long in total, or 10 to 16.5 feet. And of that, the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine, is generally only 20 to 25 centimeters long, or 8 to 10 inches. Now, the lining of the small intestine here has many folds and is covered with tiny, hair-like projections that are called villi and microvilli. And this is designed like this to increase the surface area of the small intestine for absorption. So these two parts of the small intestine are the main sites for absorption of nutrients, that is amino acids, fatty acids, glucose, vitamins and minerals, where they are then taken up and enter the bloodstream through the walls of the small intestine. And this primarily happens through active transport and diffusion, meaning that our body needs to use energy to actively absorb the nutrients, but also diffusion. Now, after the small intestine, we have the large intestine or colon. And the primary function of the large intestine is to absorb water and electrolytes from the remaining indigestible food matter and then transmit the useless waste material from the body. And it also plays a role in absorbing certain vitamins that are produced by gut bacteria. But in addition to that, there's another process that happens in the colon, and that is bacterial fermentation. So the colon, it houses a large number of bacteria which can break down substances that the human enzymes cannot break down. So such as some undigested carbohydrates and certain fibers, which are, as we remember from the blood glucose episodes, fibers are carbohydrates that are packaged in a way that our human digestive enzymes cannot break down. And this fermentation in the colon produces some byproducts which are primarily beneficial for our health, such as short-chain fatty acids that can be absorbed into the bloodstream and then used as a source of energy, and can have also many health-promoting effects, but also other byproducts that can be not so good, like gases and branched-chain fatty acids that can contribute to gastrointestinal symptoms and may indicate that there's some imbalance in our gut flora or our diet. So the colon is the last part of the digestive system. Now, when we take into account how our digestive system is designed and compare it with that of other species like our closest relatives, the non-human primates like chimpanzees and gorillas, then we can see a few things. And this is important in terms of, one of the vegan arguments or points is that gorillas are these strong muscular primates, and look at what they eat. They eat no meat or animal products, so why should we? And this is actually very wrong for a number of reasons. So, firstly, in regards to the small intestine and the large intestine or colon, humans have a long small intestine and a short large intestine. And compared to other primates, the human colon is shorter, suggesting a reduced role in fermenting fibrous plant materials. So this anatomical feature supports a diet that includes more readily digestible and absorbable nutrients, which are primarily processed in the stomach and the small intestine. So we rely much less on the fermentation process of fibrous plant materials in the colon than the other primates do, especially gorillas. And of the primates, the ratio of small intestine versus large intestine is highest in humans, being approximately 4:1. And then in chimpanzees and bonobos, they have a bit shorter small intestine than we do and a longer large intestine, with a ratio being about 3:1. And then gorillas have an even shorter small intestine and a much longer large intestine, with a small intestine to large intestine ratio about 1:1. So gorillas rely heavily on their large intestine to ferment plant materials, as their diet is primarily composed of fibrous vegetation. So when we look at the diet of the other primates and compare that with ours, we are not as well suited to digest as much fibrous plant foods as they are, because we cannot digest a large part of the complex carbohydrates in plants as they can, like the fibers and complex carbohydrates. So we are designed to digest more fast-absorbing carbohydrates and less complex fibrous carbohydrates. Now, in regards to the stomach, if we look at the stomach, so humans have a notably more acidic stomach than the other primates. And this difference is linked to various dietary and evolutionary factors that have shaped human development and survival strategies. So humans typically have a stomach pH of about 1.5 to 3.5 when it's empty, which is considered quite acidic. And this high acidity does serve a purpose. It serves mainly two purposes. One being for protein digestion, that is, the acidic environment activates the enzyme pepsin, which is critical for the breakdown of proteins into peptides, which makes it easier to digest proteins efficiently. And also, the high acidity in the human stomach helps to kill or inhibit the growth of many bacteria and pathogens that may be ingested with the food we eat, which is particularly important given the diversity of diets and cooking practices among human populations. So, other primates, such as chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans, they generally have less acidic stomachs compared to humans. Their stomach pH usually ranges higher, often 4 to 5, or even more neutral when it's empty. And these primates primarily consume a diet that is rich in fruits and vegetation, so not so much protein. And these foods are also lower in pathogenic bacteria than some of the foods that humans consume, and especially then meats. So this kind of aligns with the idea that humans are designed to digest a decent amount of proteins, and that from foods that may contain some pathogenic bacteria from, for example, animal sources like raw meat and milk and so forth. So the reasons for these differences in stomach acidity between humans and other primates are attributed to the evolution of our dietary habits. So as humans evolved, our diet began to include higher amounts of animal proteins and fats, and later then cooked foods, which are faster absorbing. So cooking food not only makes the nutrients more digestible to us, but it also kills many microorganisms and thus reducing some of the pathogenic load. But raw and cooked meats, they can still harbor pathogens, making a highly acidic stomach very beneficial for reducing the risk of foodborne illnesses. But also, early humans were likely also scavengers as well as hunters, so consuming carrion that might have been contaminated with more bacteria than the fresh fruits and vegetation that our primate cousins primarily have been consuming. So the high stomach acidity would be an evolutionary advantage in killing these bacteria and reducing the risk of illness. So we are better suited to eat these kinds of foods than, for example, gorillas. So the higher stomach acidity in humans is kind of like a significant evolutionary adaptation that aligns with changes in dietary practices and the increased consumption of diverse food sources, including animal proteins. And it not only facilitates the efficient protein digestion, but also plays a very important role in controlling pathogens, supporting the health and survival of humans across various environments. So if we look at the big picture here, our digestive system is designed to handle a diet with relatively high amounts of protein and fats from sources that may be contaminated with bacteria, and then fats and carbs that are quite easily digested, as we do not want to rely much on the fermentation process in the colon, as other primates do. We do that to some extent, but not as much as the other primates. That is, we can digest some amount of complex carbohydrates, but we are actually not designed to handle so much complex carbohydrates and fibers like many are ingesting in today's society, plant-based diets, especially, raw vegan, because I just have to talk about it here. We have a lot of methods to process all of these complex starches and fibers with methods like cooking and sprouting and so forth. So making it a lot easier for us to digest these foods, but unprocessed or uncooked, there's a lot of plant-based foods that our digestive system cannot handle and were not designed to handle. And boy, did I experience that when I was a raw vegan for a short period of time. I was a vegan for a long period of time, but a raw vegan for a short period of time. But it was horrible. My digestion was extremely bad back then. It was just horrible. And I just have to share it with you because I want to be open and honest in talking about how my health struggles have been throughout the years, because even though they may not have been visible, they were truly there and they were actually ruining my life. So just shortly here, in regards to my digestion, when I was a vegan and especially a raw vegan, I was so constipated all the time. Extreme gas production, not so flattering. I could never wear high jeans. So I really wanted to. I so wanted to, but it hurt so bad. I could maybe only do that after a few days of extreme calorie restriction or fasting, because then less of the not so beneficial byproducts of gut fermentation were then being produced in my gut, because there was little to nothing entering my digestive system. And then in between, I would have episodes with diarrhea, and then I'd feel horrible that day, but great the day after, because then my abdomen was flat and it was empty again, because there were no contents in my colon being fermented, until I'd start eating the same shit food, that I thought was the healthiest on the planet for me, that would be minimally digested and absorbed for my own body's use, and would just go along for a large part undigested into the colon, feeding the bacteria there and leading to excessive fermentation and dysbiosis. And this vicious cycle would repeat again and again and again. And then, not to mention all the other low energy symptoms I was experiencing as well, like brain fog, mood disturbances, hair loss, skin rashes, infertility problems, sleep disturbances, and the list goes on. But these are just the things that I can think of on the top of my head. But just the digestive symptoms alone were so bad that it was ruining my quality of life. And I'm not exaggerating. If you've experienced this, or if you are experiencing it for that matter, it is horrible. And I didn't realize what I was doing to myself. I didn't realize that I was causing all of this with the way I was fueling my body, with what I was feeding myself with, because I thought I was feeding my body with all the best things, like I'd been told, and everything that I was reading in regards to, all guidelines. So what was I doing wrong? I just thought I had to be even stricter with myself and eat more and more of the foods that I was eating. So, and also another argument from the plant-based community, vegans, vegetarians, etc., that we humans don't need so much protein in our diet is, when we think about it, evolutionary and based on our anatomy and the physiology of our digestive system, is wrong. So, because we are designed to have a decent amount of protein in our diet. And then there's also the point of argument that plant-based proteins do contain enough protein for us, like legumes, nuts, seeds, etc. But like we talked about in great detail in the macronutrient episode, is that proteins from the plant kingdom are not as bioavailable for us humans, and they don't contain complete amino acid profiles for us. So if you're a vegan, for example, and you're tracking your protein intake, you are most likely getting a lot less protein into your body to use than you're actually ingesting and that you think you're getting in. So if you haven't listened to my previous episodes, especially the one on macronutrients, I suggest that you go back and do that if you want to dive deeper into this. Now, yet another thing that's interesting is that, at least with primates, it seems that there's a relationship between energy allocation for digestion and cognitive function. And this is known as the expensive tissue hypothesis. So this hypothesis suggests that there's a trade-off in energy allocation between the brain and the digestive system among various species. That is, the greater the metabolic demand of the digestive system, the lesser the metabolic demand of the brain. Now, both the brain and the digestive system are metabolically expensive tissues, and even though the brain accounts for a small percentage of our body mass, it does consume a disproportionate amount of energy. And species that consume high quality, easily digestible diets, they tend to have smaller, less energy demanding digestive systems. And this reduction in gut size and complexity can free up, you could say, energy to support a larger brain. So in primates, this is often seen in species with a high quality diet rich in calories that can be efficiently processed and absorbed. And there's a notable correlation in evolutionary biology between brain size relative to body size and cognitive abilities. So species with larger brains relative to their body size, such as humans, are generally observed to have more complex societal structure, more advanced tool use, and higher cognitive abilities. So basically, the smaller and less energy-demanding digestive system, the larger and more energy-demanding brain. For example, humans, compared to other primates, humans have a relatively small digestive system and a large brain. And this aligns with the human consumption of high-quality diet that includes cooked foods, which are easier to digest and are more nutrient-dense than the raw fibrous foods that are consumed by many other primates. And the energy that is saved from a smaller gut contributes to the metabolic needs of our larger brain. Now, other primates, non-human primates like gorillas and orangutans, they have larger guts to accommodate their fibrous, you could say, lower quality diets. They invest more energy in digestion, which could limit the amount of energy available to support a larger brain. So these species show less complex tool use and social structures compared to humans. And then we have chimpanzees, for example, that are kind of in the middle there. They have a smaller and less energy-demanding gut than gorillas, but bigger and more energy-demanding gut than we humans. And they show more complex tool use and social structure compared to gorillas, but less than us humans. But research on the relationship between gut size and brain size is not always straightforward and can of course be influenced by many adaptive strategies across different environments and evolutionary paths. But at least this is an interesting theory to kind of keep in mind when you think about the digestive systems of us primates. Now, let's talk about fermentation. So, regarding fermentation in the colon, this is a complex biochemical process where gut bacteria break down substances that the human body itself cannot digest. And this is primarily various types of dietary fibers and some other undigested carbohydrates. And this serves a purpose, and we want to have a healthy microbiota in the colon. That is, we want a healthy flora of bacteria in the colon. And we want it to be only in the colon, where fermentation is supposed to happen, and not in the small intestine, for example. And now, because in this fermentation process, there are some byproducts that are produced as well, and these can have significant implications for both gut health and our overall health. So the main byproducts that are produced during fermentation in the colon are short-chain fatty acids, gases, lactic acid, alcohol, and then some other organic acids, and then also branched-chain fatty acids. So just shortly here on short-chain fatty acids, these are the most significant byproducts of colonic fermentation, and they are primarily, under normal conditions, they are primarily then beneficial to our health because, for example, one type of short-chain fatty acids is the primary energy source for the cells that line the colon, the inner lining of the colon, which supports the health and integrity of the intestinal barrier and reduces the risk of inflammation and leaky gut syndrome. But short-chain fatty acids also help to maintain an acidic pH in the colon, which inhibits the growth of pathogenic bacteria and promotes a healthy microbiota balance. They also support immune function and prevent inflammatory responses that can lead to autoimmune disorders. And one type of short-chain fatty acids influences glucose production and has roles in lipid metabolism and energy balance. And then another type is used by our muscles and other tissues for energy and can also cross the blood-brain barrier and go into the brain and potentially influence some neurological functions and appetite regulation. So while short-chain fatty acids are generally beneficial, too much fermentation in the gut can lead to several issues. For example, digestive discomfort, because overproduction of short-chain fatty acids can lead to an excess of gases, causing bloating, abdominal pain, and discomfort. Now, it can also cause dysbiosis, which is an imbalance in the gut microbiota. Dysbiosis basically means an imbalance in the gut microbiota, that is, an overgrowth of fermentative bacteria at the expense of other more beneficial microbes. So a healthy gut microbiota is incredibly diverse and balanced, comprising bacteria and fungi and also viruses and other microorganisms that interact with each other and also with the host's body in complex ways. But gut dysbiosis occurs when there's significant changes in the composition, diversity, or function of the gut microbiota. So this means an overgrowth of harmful bacteria, a reduction in beneficial bacteria, or even changes in the overall metabolic activities of the gut flora. So basically it means that there is an imbalance in the gut microbiota. We likely have an overgrowth of harmful fermentative bacteria at the expense of other beneficial microbes. And we'll talk a little bit more about dysbiosis in a short while. Now, also, high levels of fermentation can also cause overall impaired colon function because it can cause rapid transit times through the colon. So the contents of the colon move too fast through it, so the colon can't effectively absorb, for example, water and electrolytes like it normally does, and this can then lead to diarrhea or other gastrointestinal disturbances. And then in rare cases, if the production of short-chain fatty acids is very high, it can contribute to an overly acidic environment in the colon and potentially lead to acidosis, disturbing cellular activities and enzyme functions within the gut lining. Now, in regards to gases are another common byproduct of fermentation, and the primary gases that are produced include hydrogen, or H2, methane, CH4, and carbon dioxide, or CO2. And these gases can contribute to symptoms that we can experience with, digestive disorders such as bloating and discomfort. So hydrogen is produced when bacteria ferment carbohydrates, and some of it is absorbed into our bloodstream and then exhaled when we breathe out, or used by other microbes in the gut. Then methane is produced by a subset of bacteria known as methanogens, and methane production can slow intestinal transit, which might then contribute to constipation in some individuals. And then we have carbon dioxide, like I mentioned, that is produced along with other gases during the fermentation process and contributes to the gas volume in the gut. Now, lactic acid, like I mentioned earlier, is another fermentation product, but not as prominent in the colon compared to short-chain fatty acids, for example. It is primarily produced by lactic acid bacteria through the fermentation of sugars. And while it can be beneficial in the small intestine by aiding in the control of pathogenic bacteria, too much lactic acid in the colon can be problematic and is often associated with conditions like lactic acidosis if it's not properly metabolized. Now, some bacterial strains can produce alcohols like ethanol from the fermentation of carbohydrates. And even though ethanol is usually produced in very small amounts, it can be toxic and harmful if it's produced in larger quantities or if the body's detoxification pathways, for example, are compromised. And then besides short-chain fatty acids and lactic acid, other organs such as formic acid and succinic acid, they can also be produced during fermentation. And these acids play various roles in the metabolism within the gut ecosystem and contribute to the acidity of the colon, which can influence the growth of bacteria and the overall health of the gut. Now, lastly, branched chain fatty acids are produced when bacteria ferment proteins and amino acids. So unlike short-chain fatty acids, branched-chain fatty acids are not generally considered beneficial, and they may indicate protein fermentation, which can occur when there is insufficient dietary fiber, that is, that the microbiota are fermenting proteins to a larger degree instead of fiber. So the byproducts of fermentation in the colon are primarily beneficial, particularly the short-chain fatty acids, which have numerous health-promoting effects, but the production of gases and other byproducts like branched-chain fatty acids can contribute to gastrointestinal symptoms and may also indicate an imbalance in gut flora or the diet. So understanding these processes does help when managing dietary choices and treatments that are aimed at optimizing gut health and reducing digestive symptoms. Now, another very, very important factor in regards to digestion and the gut microbiome is the production of endotoxins, or lipopolysaccharides, or LPS. So endotoxins, specifically lipopolysaccharides, or LPS, are not a byproduct of the fermentation process of gut bacteria in the usual sense, but they are components of the outer membrane of gram-negative bacteria, which can be released when these bacteria either die or when the membrane is disrupted. And too much endotoxin production can have a very detrimental effect on our health. And I'll get to that in a moment, but first I'll explain just shortly what endotoxin or LPS is. So LPS molecules are complex structures that consist of a lipid component known as lipid A, which is toxic, then also a core of oligosaccharide, and then an O-antigen polysaccharide. So these molecules are unique to gram-negative bacteria, which include various common gut residents, such as E. coli and Klebsiella. And these bacteria are a normal part of the microbiota, but they can become problematic if they overgrow or if the gut barrier is compromised, such as in leaky gut. Now, in the human body, LPS molecules or endotoxins can enter the system through several pathways, or enter the bloodstream through several pathways, and the most common being through the intestinal lining. And this can occur due to increased intestinal permeability, like leaky gut, which allows bacteria and their components, such as LPS, to enter our bloodstream. But endotoxins, or LPS, can also be released during bacterial infection and as bacteria die, either through a natural life cycle of the bacteria or due to antibiotic treatment. Now, in the gut, LPS is released primarily through two mechanisms. One being bacterial lysis, that is when bacteria die naturally or are killed by the immune system or antibiotics. They can release their cellular contents, including endotoxins, such as LPS, into the surrounding environment, and then we take it up or absorb it into our bloodstream. And also active secretion, that is, some bacteria can actively secrete LPS as a part of their normal metabolic processes or in response to environmental stress. So when we have an overgrowth of gram-negative bacteria in our gut microbiome, we have an increased production, we could say, of endotoxins or LPS in our gut, which can and is then taken up or absorbed into our bloodstream. And when they are released into the body, they can be harmful. These endotoxins or LPS lipopolysaccharides can be harmful due to the following reasons. So number one being immune response trigger. So LPS are recognized by our immune system as a signal of bacterial invasion, and they bind to immune receptors such as toll-like receptor 4 or TLR4 and activate immune cells, leading to production of inflammatory cytokines. Number two being inflammation. That is, the immune response that is initiated by LPS can result in significant inflammation in our body. And while this is a part of the body's defense mechanism against pathogens, too much or chronic inflammation that is caused by LPS can lead to tissue damage and has been associated with a variety of diseases, including sepsis, inflammatory bowel disease, and certain cardiovascular conditions. Then number three being systemic effects. So if high levels of LPS enters the bloodstream, which is a condition known as endotoxemia, it can lead to a systemic health issues, including severe immune reactions like sepsis, which can be life-threatening. And as if this wasn't enough, endotoxins can interfere with cellular respiration, primarily through their impact on mitochondrial function. That is, endotoxins disturb the energy production process in our cells. Remember, the mitochondria are the small organelles in our body cells that are responsible for producing usable energy from the nutrients that come into our body from the food, so that we can stay alive and function. And an impairment in the function of the mitochondria by endotoxins, or LPS, can have significant consequences for cellular energy production and overall cellular health, and of course, then our whole body's health. So how do endotoxins or lipopolysaccharides affect the energy production process? I'll explain that here. So firstly, by induction of inflammatory responses. That is, LPS, like I said before, activates immune cells, leading to the release of inflammatory cytokines, and these cytokines can then cause mitochondrial dysfunction, either directly by affecting mitochondrial structure and function, or indirectly by altering cellular signaling pathways that regulate mitochondrial activity. Now, secondly, by production of reactive oxygen species, or ROS. So the inflammatory response that are induced by LPS leads to increased production of reactive oxygen species within our cells. And as we have talked about in previous episodes, high levels of ROS can damage mitochondrial DNA, lipids, and proteins, so impairing the mitochondria's ability to function properly. And this oxidative stress can reduce the efficiency of the electron transport chain, which we remember is the last step and a critical step of the mitochondrial machinery that produces ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, which is usable energy for our cells, the cell's energy currency. Now, thirdly, endotoxins also cause an impairment of the electron transport chain itself. So LPS has been shown to directly disrupt the function of complexes within the electron transport chain, particularly complex 1 and complex 4. So this disruption leads to a decrease in ATP production, reducing the energy available to the cell to use for vital functions. Now, the impairment of the electron transport chain also leads to further production of ROS as byproducts of inefficient electron transport, so exacerbating oxidative stress and potentially leading to a cycle of increasing damage. Now, fourthly, endotoxins have an impact on cellular metabolism because by affecting mitochondrial function, LPS can shift cellular metabolism from aerobic respiration, which is highly efficient at producing energy, or ATP, to anaerobic glycolysis, which is less efficient. So this shift, which is often termed as metabolic reprogramming, is part of the cell's response to stress, but it does come at the cost of reduced energy efficiency. And what does all of this mean? So the consequences of all of this for our cells and ultimately our whole body's health, that is, the consequences of endotoxins interfering with cellular respiration, the energy production process at cellular level, are: number 1, energy deficit. That is, the cells may experience an energy deficit, which impacts their ability to perform normal functions and maintain cellular integrity. Also, cellular death, as prolonged mitochondrial dysfunction can lead to apoptosis, which is programmed cell death, or necrosis, particularly in cells that are highly dependent on aerobic respiration, such as neurons and muscle cells. Now, thirdly, systemic effects. So in organs and systems where cells are highly dependent on mitochondrial energy, such as the heart and the brain, impaired cellular respiration can lead to significant dysfunction, contributing to the symptoms and severity of diseases like endotoxemia and sepsis. So, in summary, endotoxins, like lipopolysaccharides, disrupt cellular respiration, the energy production process, by causing mitochondrial dysfunction, increased oxidative stress, and altered cellular metabolism. And the presence of endotoxin or lipopolysaccharides in the bloodstream is known to be linked to many health conditions, and especially those that involve inflammation, such as inflammatory bowel disease or IBD. And in this condition, the inflamed gut environment in conditions like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis can facilitate the translocation of LPS from the gut and into the bloodstream, which exacerbates the inflammation. Now, also metabolic syndrome and diabetes, but chronic low-grade inflammation driven by LPS has been shown to be implicated in the pathogenesis of insulin resistance and other metabolic disturbances. And this all makes sense when we think about health and disease from an energetic point of view, like we've talked about over and over again in our previous episodes. And again, if you haven't listened to the first episodes before this one, I suggest that you go back and do that to get the whole picture here and understand this all fully. Now, also the presence of endotoxin is linked to sepsis, like I've mentioned a few times now. So in severe cases, particularly when bacteria have entered the bloodstream, high levels of lipopolysaccharides can trigger widespread inflammation in the whole body, and then sepsis, which can be life-threatening. So while LPS is not, you could say, a fermentation byproduct, their presence and release in the gut need to be managed to maintain gut integrity and prevent systemic inflammation. And this kind of underscores the importance of maintaining a balanced gut microbiota and a strong intestinal barrier as part of overall health strategies, not just gut health strategies, but overall health strategies. So in regards to our health, managing the levels of endotoxins or lipopolysaccharides in the body is an important aspect of maintaining overall health, and particularly gut health, but also overall health. So reducing endotoxin production and minimizing exposure involves controlling bacterial overgrowth and maintaining a balanced and healthy gut microbiota. And I'll break this down here. So firstly, we're going to talk about the way to maintain a healthy microbiota balance. And the way to do that is firstly preventing dysbiosis. So as we've talked about, dysbiosis is an imbalance in the gut microbiota, which can lead to an overgrowth of gram-negative bacteria, which is the source of LPS or endotoxin. And preventing dysbiosis involves primarily the right diet. So in regards to diet, eating a diet that is in line with what our digestive system is designed to digest, that is, easily digestible carbohydrates, some amount of more complex carbohydrates, but not too much, some amount of fiber, and again, not too much, and then correct amounts of fat and protein. And we don't want to ingest too much of the complex carbohydrates and fibers that go undigested through our small intestine simply to feed the gut bacteria. And this is so opposite of what is taught and talked about in dietary guidelines. But if guidelines were designed based on how the human body functions, this is how the guidelines would be, not the way they are today. So yeah, from the basic physiologic energetic point of view of how the body operates, then we would be advised to not eat as much complex carbohydrates and fibers as we are told to eat today. But I'm not going to get into that. I'm just, Now, and maybe just a side note here. I have been quite shy throughout the years talking openly about nutrition because of all the backlash or the hate I get. And I get comments like, oh, you're not a nutritionist. How can you know all of this? You're so wrong. You're simply a physician. And yes, physicians do get a lot of backlash when we express any opinions on talking about nutrition and diet. And I get that really, because in medical school, we get little to no nutritional education. But I just have to point out that even though physicians are not experts on food and nutrition itself, we are experts on the human body. That is, on how the human body works, and we are experts in interpreting how the human body responds to literally anything. So, components that affect the normal function of the body, such as probably the absolutely most important component being what the body is fueled with. But sadly, medical training involves way too much the fixing a damage that has been done to the human body, instead of maybe preventing a damage to occur, or even reversing a damage that has occurred. So at least that kind of training in medical school is not as heavily focused on as the fixing part. And I always, in regards to nutrition, I always find it interesting that the general public truly trusts physicians when it comes to medications, for example. Yet we are not pharmacists. Pharmacists are specialists on medications. Doctors are not, or physicians are not. But when it comes to nutrition, the general public does not at all trust physicians. So, even though we get more pharmacology lessons in medical school than nutrition training, physicians are not at all specialists on the medications we prescribe, even though we may know them and their functions very well, and often in great detail. But for example, when there's a new drug coming in on the market, we get, as physician, one presentation about the new drug from a pharmaceutical company. And then everyone trusts us, physicians, 100% with this new drug that we got only a short introduction on. And then we need to do self-education to learn more about it. But people find it harder to trust physicians with food. I just have to put a question mark on that here, because we kind of need to do as much, if not more, at least as much self-education on the drugs that we are using and prescribing as we have had to do with food for those physicians who have been interested in that. So this just becomes too silly for me when I think about it this way. And my point is, I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm not criticizing physicians at all. And just my point is, a physician who is more or less self-educated on nutrition, in my opinion, should be trusted just as much as a physician who is equally as self-educated on the medications that he or she is prescribing to his or her patients. So, okay, on with the topic of the podcast. So, preventing dysbiosis involves primarily the right diet, but also hydration, for example. That is an important part, that is maintaining good hydration. It does support gut motility and the overall health of the gastrointestinal tract, so also helping to flush out pathogens and toxins, and then consuming also probiotic supplements that can also help enhance the population of the beneficial bacteria in the gut, which can then outcompete harmful bacteria and reduce the production of lipopolysaccharides. Although taking probiotic supplements is actually not needed when the diet is well balanced, but it could be beneficial in the beginning. Now, in addition to preventing gut dysbiosis, the way to maintain a healthy microbiota balance involves also maintaining gut barrier integrity. That is, maintaining the integrity of the gut barrier is very important to prevent the translocation of lipopolysaccharides or endotoxin from the gut and into the bloodstream. So, in regards to nutrients, certain nutrients such as zinc, essential fatty acids, and antioxidants, they play important roles in maintaining the gut barrier function. And then also we need to avoid certain irritants. So, for example, limiting the use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs or NSAIDs, and reducing alcohol consumption. This can help protect the gut lining from damage. And then also certain types of foods that are irritating for the gut lining. And we'll get to that later. For example, grains, for example, gluten. These contain chemicals that can irritate the gut lining and damage the then gut barrier integrity. Now, in addition to maintaining a healthy microbiota, controlling bacterial overgrowth is also important for reducing endotoxin production and minimizing exposure. So the way to limit bacterial overgrowth, we can do that by number one, preventing small intestine bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, S-I-B-O. You might have heard of that. So SIBO is a condition where excessive numbers of bacteria, often those who are normally found in the colon, are then present in the small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So this can lead to increased LPS production and absorption due to the proximity to the small intestine's absorptive surfaces. So like we've touched on before, diets that are rich in complex carbohydrates and lots of fibers that are not fully digested in the small intestine can serve as food for bacteria in the colon, promoting their overgrowth. So when we have bacterial overgrowth and are ingesting lots of fibers and carbohydrates that escape our digestion, then these undigested carbohydrates reach the small. When they reach the small intestine, they can then be fermented prematurely, so providing a breeding ground for bacteria. And the fermentation of these carbohydrates in the small intestine instead of the colon can lead to symptoms of SIBO, such as bloating, gas, abdominal pain, diarrhea, and constipation. Now, also, diets that are high in complex carbohydrates can sometimes affect gut motility, leading to slower transit times because the body needs more time to digest these, so the transit time is made slower to give the body a chance to digest all of these complex carbohydrates. And such sluggish movement can then exacerbate bacterial overgrowth by allowing more time for bacteria to ferment the undigested carbohydrates. So also, regular bowel movements are an important part to limit bacterial overgrowth. So because by ensuring regular bowel movements, it helps to prevent the excessive buildup and prolonged contact of bacterial contents with the gut lining, and thereby reduces the chances of bacterial overgrowth and lipopolysaccharide production. Okay, but then you may be asking to yourself, what is a healthy gut microbiota? So in the gut microbiome, the distinction between good and bad bacteria often depends on the overall balance and context within this ecosystem. But certain types of bacteria are typically associated with health benefits, while others, especially when overgrown or out of balance, are linked to negative health outcomes, including increased endotoxin production. So a healthy gut microbiome is characterized by a diverse and balanced community of microbes that includes, like I said earlier, bacteria, fungi, viruses, and protozoa. And the exact composition can vary significantly between individuals due to factors like diet, lifestyle, genetics, and other factors. But it's not that easy to specify exact amounts of for each type of bacteria for a healthy gut microbiome, but there are general, you could say, guidelines about which types of bacteria are typically beneficial and which might be harmful in excessive amounts. So good bacteria are microbes like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, which help to digest food, and they protect against bad bacteria, and they keep your gut healthy, and we want to promote these good bacteria. But in regards to bad or harmful bacteria, while some bad bacteria are normal, too many can cause some illness or sickness. So we want to have smaller amounts of these. And now in regards to the bacteria, we talked about that endotoxins, or LPS, they come from gram-negative bacteria. But the classification of bacteria as good or bad in the context of gut health isn't strictly divided by gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria, as both of these groups can include both beneficial and harmful species. So among the gram-positive bacteria, we have mostly beneficial bacteria, but also some negative. And among the gram-negative bacteria, we have mostly harmful bacteria, but some are good in little amounts. So among the gram-positive bacteria, the beneficial gram-positive bacteria are, for example, Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium. These are two of the most well-known beneficial gram-positive bacteria, and they are common probiotics that are found in yogurt and other fermented foods, and they are important for maintaining a healthy gut environment by helping with digestion and inhibiting the growth of harmful bacteria. But then we also have Streptococcus thermophilus, which is another beneficial gram-positive bacterium used in the production of yogurt and cheese. But then we have harmful gram-positive bacteria such as C. diff. You might have heard of that before. This is a harmful gram-positive bacteria that can cause severe diarrhea and more serious intestinal conditions, especially after antibiotic use, when that disrupts the balance of the gut bacteria. And then we also have Staph aureus and Enterococcus faecalis. These can be a part of a normal gut flora, but they can become problematic if they overgrow or enter other parts of the body where they can cause infections. Now, regarding gram-negative bacteria, the beneficial gram-negative bacteria are less commonly noted for their benefits than the gram-positive probiotics, but certain gram-negative bacteria are they do play a role in the gut. For example, Bacteroidetes. I hope I said this correctly. This is a large phylum of gram-negative bacteria, which is crucial for breakdown of complex molecules into simpler ones that the body can then use. And then regarding the harmful gram-negative bacteria, we have E. coli. This includes strains that are harmless and some that are beneficial, but also pathogenic strains that can cause severe illness, including diarrhea and kidney failure. Then we have Helicobacter pylori, which is a gram-negative bacteria that can live in the digestive tract and cause ulcers and stomach cancer. And like we said, gram-negative bacteria often produce endotoxins, or specifically lipopolysaccharides, which can be toxic to the host, ourselves, if they enter our bloodstream. So a balanced gut or good gut health means that you have enough good bacteria to keep things running smoothly and not too many bad bacteria that can cause problems. And this balance helps with digestion, protecting you from illness, and even impacts your mood and energy. And in regards to the gut health and mood, that's a whole other topic that we will cover in a different episode later. But a healthy gut microbiome is not just about having good bacteria in abundance and keeping harmful bacteria at check. It's also about maintaining a diverse microbial environment. So disruptions in the balance of these bacteria can lead to various health problems, like we've talked about, and this is known as dysbiosis. So just a little further on dysbiosis, because this is important. This refers to an imbalance in the microbial ecosystems of the body, typically concerning the gut, but also is applicable for other microbiotas, like those on the skin, in the mouth, or in the urogenital tract. And this imbalance can involve changes in the composition, diversity, or function of the microbial community, leading to negative health consequences. And dysbiosis can be because of decreased diversity of the microbiome, or due to an overgrowth of harmful microbes, or due to a loss of beneficial microbes. So dysbiosis often involves a reduction in the diversity of the microbiome, which can make the ecosystem more susceptible to disturbances. Or it involves an increase in the number of potentially pathogenic microbes relative to the beneficial ones, which can then lead to infections or overproduction of harmful metabolic byproducts. Or it can involve a reduction in the population of protective or symbiotic microbes, which can impair various functions such as nutrient processing, protection against pathogens, and modulation of the immune system. So there are several factors that can contribute to the development of dysbiosis, and these include, for example, an important one, antibiotic use, because broad-spectrum antibiotics can kill beneficial bacteria along with pathogenic ones, and thereby disrupting the balance of the microbiome. And then the diet, like we've talked about. Stress, chronic stress can affect gut motility and secretion. Also the immune function and the gut-brain axis, all of which can impact the microbial balance. Disease, certain diseases such as inflammatory bowel disease or IBD can directly alter the gut environment, making it more hospitable to pathogenic bacteria and less so to beneficial ones. And then also hygiene and environmental factors. For example, excessive cleanliness or exposure to environmental toxins can also disrupt the natural microbial balance. And then to fix dysbiosis, we can do that by, for example, restoring microbial balance. And this can be achieved through diet changes, using probiotics to replenish beneficial bacteria, and also prebiotics to feed the beneficial bacteria. We can also do that by addressing the underlying causes, such as treating any underlying health conditions, looking at our dietary choices, managing stress efficiently, adjusting medication use like antibiotics under medical supervision, and then also lifestyle changes, for example, improving sleep, exercise, and overall hygiene practices. These can also help in balancing the microbiome. So we've covered a lot here now, and I'm not going to go in any more detail on any topic here. I think this concludes kind of the overview of gut health. So I just want to mention, if you're experiencing some kind of low energy symptoms or conditions like fatigue, brain fog, mental health problems like anxiety, depression, mood swings, trouble sleeping, have you been diagnosed with ADHD? Do you have any food intolerances, any inflammatory conditions, autoimmune conditions, frequent infections, metabolic disturbances such as prediabetes or type 2 diabetes? Do you have any infertility problems? Maybe you've been diagnosed with PCOS recently. Are you experiencing hair loss or any digestive conditions or problems? Do you have a cardiovascular disease? Anything. If you're experiencing anything of this, take a good hard look at your diet and your digestion and seriously evaluate this. And if you believe that your digestion is just perfect and you are thriving, then great. But if you're experiencing any low energy symptoms or conditions, the absolutely most important factor to take into account in your life is, what am I feeding my body? What am I running my engines on? What type of fuel am I using? Now, even though I am a physician, I do have a disclaimer on all my episodes, so please do read that. Any advice or information that is given is not to be taken as medical advice. I am simply trying to help you understand your body fully so that you can make informed dietary and lifestyle decisions for yourself. So thank you for today, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for tuning into this episode. If you're looking for more information or want to check out any studies I reference, head on to my website, babyletsmove.com. You can also join me for a workout through my app called Baby Let's Move, available in both App Store and Google Play. And don't forget to connect with me on Instagram and YouTube for even more content. If you enjoyed today's show, please consider giving it a 5-star rating or a like and share it with a friend. It really helps me reach more amazing listeners like you. Until next time, keep moving and stay healthy.